So you had the benchmark. In December we put that out. Then we did a consistent time series of input-output tables and industry estimates. So you got this really cool set of tools now which are consistent over time, which gives us the basis for now beginning to produce the quarterly GDP. And so now we're going to have this, we're finally back to 1934 or so, and we've sort of got all three of our measures there. We're going to have on a quarterly basis, we've got an income, expenditure, and production method of estimating GDP. And this is sort of a breakthrough in many ways. Well, one, for users, they tend not to think in terms of products. As we certainly learned during the Great Recession as we focused on the financial industry, not their products, as we looked at the motor vehicle industry during a recovery, we thought of the motor vehicle industry, not their individual products, which is the way we present them in GDP. So I think it's a major step forward in having timely data. It's also really important because if you look at something like the motor vehicle industry, we're producing estimates, in the spring, so 3-4 months after the end of the year, and there was no way of seeing what was happening in the quarters. And if you were able to look at the quarters, though, for the motor vehicle industry, you could identify a lot sooner when the turning point for the industry, and to realize things were actually getting better for quite some time before our annual industry data showed you in a very kind of obtuse way, because you couldn't see that turning point in that data very well. So it's really important for those purposes. It's also important for statistical purposes because it allows us to see when those three measures aren't tracking one another or individual industries which should be related are not working. It helps us identify when we've got a problem, where that problem might be. This is one of the great advantages of these multiple entry sets of accounts, is it allows you to identify where things just don't quite make sense, where the numbers are not working together well, where I've got sales soaring in industry, but I don't see that in the intermediate inputs. I don't see that in the compensation. I don't see it in the profit. Something's going wrong with that data. So that gives us this unique perspective within the U.S. statistical system. And the other countries use national accounts for these purposes and guiding your whole national statistical network. So it has a very important statistical purpose. It also has a very important set of tools which I think have been neglected over time. If I want to know about the effects of a supply disruption, for example, the input-output counts are just perfect for that. Or I want to know the effect of an increase in petroleum prices on my industry, and I want to trace it through. Again, I can go to look at the input-output accounts for that kind of thing. Shifts in final demand for my industry, I also can look at it for those kind of things. Or benchmarking my own industry in terms of growth and what's happening. Very powerful tool, but I think they were hard to use when they weren't consistent. They didn't map nicely into your GDP. Where it didn't map nicely into your productivity estimates. I think now they do. Or another one for public policy purposes are things like hurricanes. Hurricane Katrina, I remember particularly well. Greenspan talked about it in his book. National accounts and these input-output accounts are just beautiful because, right after Katrina, there was all this talk of what is going to happen to the petroleum industry, what's going to happen to cost, what's the follow-on impact. But these sets of accounts allow you to know what the size of the thing is, how much petroleum was coming out of that Gulf region using the regional piece of our accounts. Then you go to the input-output accounts, you can see what other industries are. In fact, it's bounded by order of magnitude numbers, and you know how big it is. Also, you know the knock-on effects of it. You can see what the effects are in other components. So it's a really, really cool set of tools, but we didn't quite have them up to date. I think a lot of people used them, but I think they're much more powerful now. And just to tell you that there are some other new products coming out of the BEA that are related to this. One is we'll be bringing out quarterly, not only GDP by industry, but later by state. Because once we have these control totals from the industry, we'll be able to do these state estimates